Today we're going to be getting into some tech specs and performance numbers for Microsoft Flight Simulator. We're going to be running it on a Z490 chipset platform with a 10700K overclocked at 5 GHz with a 2070 Super Founders Edition card, 16 GB of 3200 MHz DDR4 RAM from Corsair, and we're going to be also testing some temperature readouts with the ITX case that I have from NZXT, the H210, as well as the AIO from Corsair, the H115i XT RGB is the full name, I believe. But without further ado, let's just go ahead and get right into it. We're going to be running this at 3440 by 1440, as that's what I usually play with. Let's just see what the numbers look like. How about that? This engine uses petabytes of data, or rather can utilize petabytes of data from the cloud on demand, and it's fascinating that we're at this level with technology that we can simulate a planet, not all at once of course, but the illusion is that you are simulating the entire planet when you're playing the sim. It's absolutely astounding. It's groundbreaking. And of course, we wouldn't consider this once the new cards release from Nvidia and AMD eventually. What I have now is going to be considered mid-range, if not already considered mid-range. So just a little tidbit if you don't know too much about the PC world. You could spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars and you'll still be in mid-tier. So just keep that in mind. So here we are in the lowest mode, running at 3440 by 1440, and right now you can see up in the top left corner, if you could see, it's very small, but we're getting around 80-ish FPS. We get into the cockpit and then we're around 70 FPS. You could also see the temperatures listed there. Right now I actually have the graphics card running at 8,000 megahertz instead of 7,000. The CPU, of course, like I stated previously, that's running at 5 gigahertz, and with the 280mm AIO, temperatures are actually tame. And mind you, this is from actually playing prior to actually recording, so the temperatures are still a bit moderate, so just keep that in mind. And when you bump it up here to the next up, medium, we do get some drops to the frame rate instantly. We're under 60 FPS, but right around 57 as we move a little bit closer to the town / village here in the Virgin Isles. It of course drops down as it tries to load in the geometry of these buildings and the land around it. But you can see it's really not that detailed, but there is some texturing and details around here to make it look lifelike with the vehicles and whatnot. Of course the ocean helps a lot, but you can still see like the tree line looks a bit fake. The shading is not as good. You know, you can definitely tell. You can even see on the texture on the inside of the plane. It's not as detailed. It's not as sharp. It's a little more muddled. So yeah, let's move up. Here's Rio de Janeiro. We just loaded in by Christ the Redeemer. And you can see that we're hovering around 65 FPS on low at 3440 by 1440. And we're gonna go ahead and bump it up here in a little bit. Let's see what we get. All right, so we just bumped it up. We are getting now around 40, 45 FPS, 38 FPS. And you can see the detail on this is quite dense, very dense. On this, it's a little harder to see that it's in medium versus high, because it actually looks pretty detailed in this area, or at least the buildings do. The buildings cover up a lot of the muddled textures, like you can see right there. But it looks great. It handles it okay. But let's bump that up here. Let's bump up to, all right, this is high. This is high end. We're hitting around 38, 34, 37 FPS. some stuttering, but that's likely from the recording. Let's go ahead and move up to Ultra, and let's see how it handles that in this area. This area is actually quite a lot bigger than Miami, so it'll probably take a massive hit. And boom, we dropped below 10 FPS. We were at 6 FPS for a split second, and the buildings are back in. Wow. I mean, it looks great, but that's not playable. So let's go ahead and take a look at what I would go ahead and do to alleviate the rendering concerns. And this is probably something that would help you out as well. Okay guys, so once in the menu, what you would want to go ahead and do is go to Options, General, Graphics, and here, Render Scaling. By default, it's going to be at 100. You can just tune it down to whatever fits your system best, but for this configuration, I find that 80 to 70 works, depending on how dense the area is that you're flying around. So just keep that in mind. This render scaling definitely helps out. Also, scaling this back from TAA to DLAA slightly affects the quality of the anti-aliasing. However, it still looks just as good to me. It might just work the same for you. So hope this helps. And here we are flying near Sydney's Opera House at night. You can see the lighting effects here in full display. And we are running this at Ultra. Getting 25 FPS on average, it looks like, and some stutters, dropping down to 16 FPS at points. I'm not the best flyer, so please forgive me there. It's a gorgeous game. Simulator, whatever you want to call it, it's gorgeous. And here we are flying over Japan, Tokyo, Japan, nearby, well, I wouldn't say nearby Mount Fuji, but within viewing distance of Mount Fuji. Japan is densely packed, and it's very similar to how New York would have been rendered, because it looked very similar to this. Just a sprawling, and LA as well, just a sprawling metropolis. It's just amazing. It's just absolutely amazing. I actually do have some clips here of flying near Mount Fuji, because it's a beautiful sight. And here we are nearby Mount Fuji on Ultra, and we're hovering around 40 FPS. But also keep in mind, at this point, I'm using an 80% render resolution at 1440p, or 3440 by 1440p, and it plays really nicely while still giving me some great visuals, and really not as much anti-aliasing. I could really just deal with this. And I just wanted to go ahead and close out this video with some flybys around Giza. It's so picturesque, and it looks so good. So to recap, essentially what we're seeing is an average of above 70 FPS when we're running low mode at 1440p, 100% resolution. We are dropping down around 10 to 15 FPS when we move over to medium quality. We're seeing around 45 FPS, can drop down to around 30. And when we move up to high end, we're thinking we're probably going to see around 35 to probably mid 20s, depending on the density of the area that you're loading into. Lastly, of course, we have Ultra, which we know in cities will drop you to single digit FPS. It's nearly unplayable without changing your anti-aliasing to DLAA from TAA and dropping the render resolution down 80% to 70% instead of just leaving it at 100%, and then you'll actually see some decent frame rates in the 40s to 30s, which for a flight simulator, that's about average, and that's playable for sure. Overall, I thought this was an interesting topic to cover, so that's going to be it from me today, you guys. I thank you so much for sticking around and watching through this whole video. I'd like to hear what you think. I'd like to hear about your setups and what kinds of performance numbers you're getting on Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. You guys are amazing. I thank you so much for the support that you've been giving me. And I look forward to making more content. So thank you so much. You have a great night.